What's up everybody, this is Silent Wolf and this is my tutorial for the Damageless setup for the super jump roll on Oil Drum Alley. I'm going to go ahead and just play the video so you guys get an idea of what the trick looks like, and then from there I'm going to go back and break it down bit by bit. One thing that's important to note, that the reason for going for this setup as opposed to the traditional setup where you do take damage and sacrifice Donkey Kong, is that although this setup is a tiny bit slower, this enables you to do the elevator antics super jump roll in one of the following stages. So if you're ever deciding to go for a top time, this is definitely something you're going to want to opt for. Alright, so that's what the trick looks like if done ideally, and there are a lot of different ways to sort of back this trick up if it fails. So let's just talk about what it looks like ideally first. So right off the bat we're going to set up the super jump here, and to do this we're just going to need to take damage on the right side of this oil drum. For whatever reason, if you take damage on the left side, Diddy does not jump off the top of the screen when he dies. So we want to be sure to take damage on the right side in particular. So as we see, Diddy jumps off the top of the screen. Get Diddy back. Now right here, right when you get just to the right of this black pole in the background, that's where we're going to want to do a full jump with Donkey Kong. I recommend always doing a full jump here just to make sure that you're doing it the same every time. If you're to do like a mid-height jump, for example, while performing this trick, there's a good chance that it's harder to acquire muscle memory for it because there can be more variance with the mid-jump. And what we're going to try and do, and you'll see Donkey Kong do this in a moment, is do a full jump directly to the right side of this oil drum without going any farther than about right here, because there's two crems that are going to spawn just after we jump over there. But what we want to do is only spawn the leftmost one. Boom. So we can see the leftmost one is spawned right here. As soon as we can, we want to swap to Diddy Kong right here. And this is where the trick gets a bit tricky. So let's see. Just going to slow down the speed here a bit. Swap to Diddy Kong. We're going to run to the left, just to make sure that we're in the same position for the trick every time. And I'm actually going to back up just a little bit here, because there's something important about this part as well. So right after you swap, you're going to want to run straight into the oil drum to the left, just to make sure you're in the same spot every time. Sometimes if you swap there, you might end up in a slightly different spot, and we really just want to make sure the trick is consistent as possible. Now, when I stop running left is usually right when this blue creme hits the ground. So the moment he hits the ground, boom, I stop running left. And the reason that I do this every time is just so I have an extra element of muscle memory when doing this trick. Some people opt to just keep running left the entire time until they go for the jump roll. I prefer to stop running left right here, just for the sake of having that additional reinforcement of muscle memory. So I'm used to releasing left and then pressing right a certain amount of time afterwards. So now at this point I'm just waiting for the creme. And as soon as he's pretty much at the lowest point in his jump, maybe even one frame before that, is when we're going to press right. You'll see right here he's at the lowest point. This is the first frame that I hit right on the D-pad. Five frames later, I press Y to go for the super jump roll right here. If you time it this way, you'll get the double explosion. You can see that there's two there. This is the fastest way to do the trick. If you were too late on pressing right, let's say you pressed right after the creme was at his lowest point, you would take damage with Diddy Kong. If you pressed right too early, before the creme was at the lowest point in his jump, but you did hit the frame, you would get a jump roll instead of a super jump roll. So rather than a cartwheel, you would see Diddy Kong just kind of flying through the air, curled up into a ball. So at this point, this is when we've successfully hit the trick. We're going to roll through this creme. Notice that I'm not doing an extendo through this creme. Let's go ahead and just play that back in slow motion real quick. So when you hit the trick successfully like this with the double explosion, no need to do an extendo through the second creme, we're just holding Y. One thing that you do need to do is right when you're over this gap, notice I press left here on the D-pad, you want to do a really quick left-right. So just press left for a couple frames and then go back to holding right. And then that'll position us to hit this beaver right here. And as you hit this beaver, you're going to want to release Y. You can see I've released Y here on the D-pad. And the reason for this is that if you've released Y, you'll gain vertical height more quickly than if you were holding Y through that beaver. So what we're going to do is release Y, take advantage of this and get some vertical height. And then once we're at the height we desire, we're going to repress Y. If you watch the input display, right here, repress it, and then continue to hold it through this final beaver. And then boom, we have maximum speed, damageless, super jump roll. The maximum speed you can get is after rolling through 4 enemies, which we've attained. Going back to full speed, we can see where we need to release B to stop gaining height, and it's going to be right after this oil drum. And a good way to remember this is as soon as you've seen the Manky Kong, right there, this motherfucker, it's the first oil drum after him. Once it goes off screen, this side of it goes off screen, you'll see I stop releasing, or I stop holding B rather, and that's when we start descending, and this will position us perfectly for landing right before we reach the exit of the stage. 34:14, so what that timer means is we beat the stage in 34 seconds and 14 frames. So 34.25 basically. And it'll be good to keep an eye on the timer throughout this tutorial to just get a grasp on the relative time differences of the trick done ideally versus the backups that you may find yourself needing to do while going for this trick. So, as I mentioned before, if you go too early but still hit the frame, it's going to put you in a jump roll state rather than the cartwheel super jump roll state. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to back that up if that happens. So the setup here is going to be exactly the same. Full jump right after this pull, swap, run right until the creme bounces. Right before he bounces, you can see I'm already pressing right here on the D-pad before he's bounced. So already now I can tell that I've gone too early. Boom. And what happens is you enter the jump roll state rather than the super jump roll state. The problem with this is you're not gaining any vertical height. So if you try and just follow through and complete the stage like this, you're immediately going to get cock blocked by an oil drum. So what you need to do is, at this point in the trick, react. You need to be like, oh, I got the single explosion. I went too early. So what you need to do is head back to the left. Crouch on this platform. That'll take you out of the jump roll state. Hold Y. Begin running right, and the moment you start running right, you want to release and tap Y before you leave the ledge to start a roll. And then we're just going to roll through this creme before he gets away from us. Now, this is where it gets a little bit trickier. Notice that I'm not holding Y at this point. I actually rolled through that last creme without holding Y, and that's because we need to extendo through him to manipulate our height a little bit. So, just to go back, we rolled through this creme without holding Y. So as soon as we start this roll, we've released it. The video program's kind of fucking up. Going back, tap Y. Now, we're gonna repress Y. You see these two black bars in the background here? We're gonna repress once we've passed the center of these black bars. So I've passed the center, I've repressed Y. And I've released it again because we're gonna do another extendo off this other beaver. Boom. Still haven't repressed it because we want to just get more vertical height here. And then once we have that height, repress and hold through the final naughty once more. And the visual cue for when you release is still going to be the same. It's still going to be after that oil drum right there, after that first Mankey. So if you recall, the time after finishing the stage while doing the trick, getting the double explosion was 34 seconds and 14 frames. This one lost about 3.5 seconds over that. So you do lose a bit of time, but at least you can still back up the trick and still have an opportunity to go for the super jump roll and antics. So it's not the end of the world, but it does lose a few seconds. Alright, now I'm going to show you guys what to do when you accidentally spawn both crems as opposed to just one of the crems. You can still back this up whether you get the double or single explosion. So first, just gonna start here for the setup. We jump a little bit too far to the right relative to the oil drum, so you can see we accidentally spawn the second crem right here. So don't worry, we can back this up. You just need to be aware of how to do that. Get the double explosion. We hold Y through both of the crems. Now, over the gap here, you're going to want to do the quickest left-right that you possibly can. It's going to be so fast that you don't even see it registered on my input display. And that'll position us to hit this beaver right here. We're going to release Y as we go through this beaver once again, just so we can gain that vertical height a little bit quicker. And then repress and hold through that last beaver there. And we can let this play out just to see exactly how this time compares to the other backups. "34 seconds flat," so it's actually a little bit faster than only spawning one crem and getting the double explosion. But the downside is, if you spawn two crems and get the single explosion, you will lose a lot more time. So you don't want to intentionally spawn both crems, usually. Now, looking at the setup once again, if you are to get the single explosion after spawning two crems, once again, you jump too far right relative to the oil drum. So what we're going to need to do differently here is go all the way to the right here, despawn the crem, and then basically do the same setup that we normally do if we get the single explosion. It might be possible to back it up by reacting instantly, going back to the left, and then rolling through that crem without having to despawn them, but I think that it's pretty unrealistic to do that without just predicting it in the first place. Alright, now sometimes, because you're trying to jump as closely, as far left as possible when landing next to this oil drum, sometimes it is possible to accidentally just straight up land in the fire. When you do that, you can back this up by just doing the regular damage full ODA setup. Oops. Go to the left, run slightly past the black pole, and do the regular setup. Doing this, you can't perform the antics SJR, but at least you still probably have a speed run. $33.04, just a little over a second faster than the Damageless setup there. Something else important to note is that if you're going for the Damageless setup, It is actually faster to kill yourself if you miss it and reattempt the trick than to play out the stage optimally. So just to look at a couple examples of that, of how you would do that rather. Let's say you were too early to hit the trick. So you roll, you would just want to immediately roll into the pit there. If you were too late to hit the trick, this would just give you the super jump. You could super jump through the stage, but you could also die and then reattempt the trick. And what this would do would optimally save you around 5-ish seconds, assuming you got the double explosion and performed the trick optimally. Otherwise, I think it would save you maybe 1.5 or 2 if you got the backup. It really depends, but that really just depends on if you're going all in at that point. Anyways, that's a tutorial, and thank you guys for watching.